Laudetur Jesus Christus. Vatican and World News.
Today, Friday, December 11th, is the feast of Pope St. Damasus. And these are today's headlines. Pope Francis receives thanks and delegations from Slovenia and Italy for their gift of the Vatican Christmas tree and nativity scene. EU and British negotiators warn about the possibility of the UK leaving the EU single market without a deal. And the Vatican hosts a virtual seminar on providing aid to meet the humanitarian crises facing Syria and Iraq. In the Vatican, I'm Christopher Wells. Our top story, Pope Francis on Friday morning met with a delegation from Slovenia and another from the Italian region of Abruzzo, thanking them for the gift of the Christmas tree and the nativity scene for the Vatican this year. Lydia O'Kane has this report.
The Feast of Christmas reminds us that Jesus is our peace, our joy, our strength and our comfort. Those were Pope Francis' words on Friday morning to a delegation who presented this year's Christmas tree and nativity scene to the Vatican. The majestic spruce tree, which takes pride of place in St. Peter's Square, comes from Slovenia, while the ceramic crib has been donated by the Italian town of Castelli in Italy's Abruzzo region. Thanking those present ahead of the formal inauguration on Friday afternoon, the Pope said, "These icons of Christmas are more than ever a sign of hope for the people of Rome and for those pilgrims who will have the opportunity to come and admire them." The tree and nativity scene help to create a favourable Christmas atmosphere for living in faith the mystery of the Redeemer's birth, he said. Pope Francis noted that when we contemplate the Holy Family, we are attracted by their disarming humility. He went on to say that there is no room for them, not even a small room, yet they keep vigil. Mary keeps everything in her heart, while Joseph looks for a place for her and the child who is about to be born. In order to receive the gifts of peace, joy, strength and comfort, said the Pope, we need to feel small, poor and humble like the characters in the crib. Highlighting the difficulties people are facing this Christmas in particular, Pope Francis stressed that in the midst of the suffering of the pandemic, Jesus, small and helpless, is the sign that God gives to the world. Concluding his greeting, the Pope referred to his visit to the Italian town of Greccio last year, where he signed his apostolic letter Admirabile Signum, dedicated to the Christmas crib. It will do us good to reread it in these days, he said. In compliance with the anti-COVID-19 regulations, the Christmas tree and nativity scene will be inaugurated on Friday at 5 p.m. The ceremony will be presided over by Cardinal Giuseppe Bertello and Bishop Ferdinando Verges Alzaga, respectively President and Secretary General of the Governorate of Vatican City State. I'm Lydia O'Kane.
And you can follow that ceremony live, the inauguration of the nativity scene and the ceremonial lighting of the Christmas tree, beginning at 5 p.m. Rome time, so just a few minutes after this broadcast. You can follow that on our web portal at www.vaticannews.va. In world news, European leaders have warned that Britain's exit from the European Union will likely be without a crucial deal on $1 trillion in annual trade. Britain already quit the EU in January, but has remained in the EU single market and customs union during a transition period. As Stefan Boss reports, however, that will end on December 31st.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson confirmed on Friday that it was very likely that talks would fail. He made it clear that Britain might leave the European Union's orbit without a trade agreement. In separate remarks, Prime Minister Johnson said their negotiations were snagged on regulatory measures and fishing rights.
The deal on the table is really not at the moment right for the UK, and I'll tell you why. There's a couple of things at least. The most important is that really just in the last couple of weeks they've brought back the idea of this equivalence between the UK and the EU, which basically means that whatever new laws they brought in, we would have to follow, or else face punishment, sanctions, tariffs, or whatever. And the second thing, obviously, is fisheries, where many years now after people have voted to to leave the EU, we wouldn't still have control of our waters.
The European Commission, the EU's executive, is also pessimistic about the prospects of a breakthrough in trade talks with Britain. Commission President Ursula von der Leyen suggested that both sides should prepare for a messy divorce.
It is difficult. We are willing to grant access to the single market to our British friends. It's the largest single market in the world. But the conditions have to be fair. They have to be fair for our workers and for our companies. And this fine balance of fairness has not been achieved so far. Our negotiators are still working, and we will take a decision on Sunday.
Markets didn't like that news. The British pound tumbled and stocks fell as investors started to price in the risk of a chaotic end to the 5-year Brexit crisis. The standoff overshadowed the European Union summit. Leaders did agree on a €1.8 trillion, that's $2.2 trillion EU budget and coronavirus recovery fund, after Hungary and Poland withdrew their veto. For Vatican Radio, Vatican News, I am Stefan Bos in Budapest.
A virtual meeting organized by the Vatican's Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development provided a forum to address the humanitarian emergency, the refugee crisis, and the exodus of Christians from Iraq, Syria, and neighboring countries. As Linda Bordoni reports, a video message from Pope Francis to participants of the meeting on Thursday afternoon set the tone for discussions aimed at coordinating aid and development programs for the suffering populations.
Every effort, be it small or great, carried out to promote the path of peace, Pope Francis said to the participants at the meeting, is like adding a brick to the structure of a just society, which is open and welcoming, and where everyone can find a place to dwell in peace. The online meeting was attended by about 50 Catholic charities, representatives of local episcopates, ecclesial institutions and religious congregations, all of them working in Syria, Iraq and neighbouring countries. Apostolic nuncios to the region were also present to emphasise the support and closeness of the Pope and of the Holy See. Amongst those addressing the meeting was Cardinal Pietro Parolin, who noted that the humanitarian crisis in the suffering Middle Eastern nations is aggravated by political deadlock, institutional collapse, and more recently by the COVID-19 pandemic. He called for a special commitment in Syria and Lebanon, where he said there's an urgent need for a strong commitment not only to reconstruct, but also to support Catholic schools and hospitals, two cornerstones of the Christian presence in the country and throughout the region. The Vatican Secretary for Relations with States, the Prefect of the Congregation for the Oriental Churches, and UN High Commissioner for Refugees Filippo Grandi brought their perspectives to the table. Cardinal Mario Zenari, Apostolic Nuncio to Syria, offered his personal testimony on the human and material consequences of the crisis in the country that, according to the United Nations, sees 11 million people in need of assistance. Aloysius John, Secretary General of Caritas Internationalis, closed the meeting with a reflection on how Catholic agencies can promote the transition from the emergency phase to that of integral development. He also called for the immediate lifting of sanctions on Syria to alleviate the suffering of the local population and to allow humanitarian organizations to respond to the urgent needs related to the approach of winter and to the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm Linda Bordoni.
With several death row inmates set to face execution in coming weeks, the bishops of the United States have once again called on the federal government to end the use of capital punishment. Father Benedict Mayaki has this report.
Bishops in the U.S. have reiterated their calls for an end to the death penalty as the government speeds up the pace of federal executions in the last days of the Trump presidency. The chairman of the U.S. Bishops' Domestic Justice and Human Development Committee, Archbishop Paul Coakley of Oklahoma, said in an interview on Thursday that the church is opposed to the use of the death penalty and that the trend of the resumption of federal executions is very concerning. Likewise, the Bishops' Conference of Indiana said that it recognizes the pain and evil caused by those on death row and prays that the families and victims of these crimes have comfort and healing. However, they insist that to teach that murder is wrong by allowing the government to commit murder is not only wrong but irrational. They added that Pope Francis's latest encyclical, Fratelli Tutti, reaffirms the Church's commitment to calling for the abolition of the death penalty around the world. In the U.S., 5 executions have been scheduled in the upcoming weeks before President-elect Joe Biden's 20th January 2021 inauguration. On Thursday evening, Brandon Bernard, the 9th federal death row inmate to be executed in 2020, was put to death by lethal injection at the federal penitentiary in Terre Haute, Indiana, after the Supreme Court denied a stay of his execution. He was convicted for his role in the June 1999 kidnap and murder of Todd and Stacy Bagley, a couple who were Christian youth ministers from Iowa. Despite not being identified as the gunman who fatally shot the couple, Bernard was accused of buying the lighter fluid and setting the couple's car on fire with them in it. At the time of the crime, Bernard was 18 years old. Several celebrities, pro-life activists, politicians, and renowned personalities advocated for a commutation of Bernard's sentence, but their calls to the Trump administration were to no avail. Brandon Bernard's execution on Thursday is the first to be carried out during the presidential period between an election and an inauguration in over a century. I'm Father Benedict Mayaki.
Finally, this morning, Pope Francis and his closest collaborators heard the second Advent reflection delivered by the preacher of the papal household, Cardinal Raniero Cantalamessa. Last week, the Cardinal spoke about death, while this week he reflected on the need to rediscover faith in a life to come. Robin Gomes has more.
Cardinal Raniero Cantalamessa pointed out that the COVID-19 pandemic has laid bare another truth, that wealth, good health, beauty, physical strength, everything is transitory. However, he said the crisis can be an opportunity to discover with relief that despite this transitoriness, there is a rock on which we can build our life on earth, and this is faith in eternity. By helping rediscover faith in afterlife, the Pope's preacher said, religions can contribute to the effort to create a better and more fraternal world. It makes us understand that we are traveling together on our way to a common homeland where there are no distinctions of race or nationality. For Christians, Cardinal Cantalamessa explained, faith in eternal life is based on a precise fact, the resurrection of Christ and his promise. Jesus said, in my Father's house there are many dwelling places. And St. Paul underscores life after that when he says, if Christ has not been raised, our preaching is useless, and so is your faith. If only for this life we have hope in Christ, we are of all people most to be pitied, he said. However, belief in afterlife, the Cardinal explained, waned in the 20th century through certain thinkers. Secularization set in, bringing this process to completion with a whole set of social attitudes that are hostile to religion and to faith. The natural desire to live forever thus becomes a desire or frenzy to live well, even at the expense of others if necessary. Without belief in eternity, he said, human suffering appears doubly absurd and without remedy. The fading concept of eternity, Cardinal Cantalamessa concluded, has an impact on believers as it reduces their ability to face the suffering and trials of life with courage. I am Robin Gomes.
And that brings us just about to the end of this edition of Vatican and World News. For more on these and other stories, and to hear this broadcast as a podcast, you can visit our web portal at www.vaticannews.va. And in just a few minutes, you'll be able to go there to see the lighting of the Vatican Christmas tree in St. Peter's Square. Many thanks this afternoon go to our producers in studio. In the Vatican, I'm Christopher Wells.